African Students Union. On behalf of the All African Students Union, the West Africa Center for Counter-Extremism, and the Center for Security Policy and Research, I would like to officially and warmly welcome you all to our virtual program on the role of universities in countering violence extremism. My name is Adelaide, and I'm going to be your moderator for this program. So this program comes against the backdrop of the increasing cases of extremist groups on the African continent. We've seen it with Jenin and the Islamic State of the Greater Sahara in Mali and the Sahel, also with Boko Haram and ISWAP in Nigeria and its neighboring countries, as well as Al-Shabaab in Somalia and its neighboring countries of Uganda and Kenya. Also with the Allied Democratic Forces and ISCAP in the Central African Province. So all these groups shows the dominating and emerging extremist groups on the African continent. And as such, over the years, we've seen its effect on educational institutions, mainly universities in Africa. So it's two things. Either universities are serving as a hotbed for extremist recruitment, or they are serving as the forefront for extremist attacks. So one way or the other, these educational institutions, mainly universities, are playing a great role in either countering violence extremism or in being victims to it. So this program comes against that background, of which we are seeking to not only promote awareness, but also foster a healthy discourse on how we can discuss issues of violence extremism and come up with ways and recommendations to mitigate these emerging threats. So I have three people on the panel with me who are going to be having this discussion. So first of all, we have retired Lieutenant Colonel Larry Bedlo-Lati. And we also have, who is the founder and executive chairman of the Human Security Research Center. We also have Dr. Walter Sama, the head of Mission Analysis Cell at the African Union Mission in Somalia, and Dr. Evans Agbo-Tete, a senior lecturer with the Regional Maritime University. You're all welcome to the program.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you too. Thank you. So just before we start, we want to have a short remark coming from you just before we start the program. So Dr. Evans, if you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, so can we please get a short remark? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Good morning to everyone joining us this morning, and I would say that it's an honor to be invited to be part of this very important program. Discussing extremism and terrorism in Africa in generally, it is very important that the youth, especially university students, would get to know exactly what is happening. I'm saying this because when I was in a university, things like this were never a bother for me. But then going on, you realize that so many of our young people are being recruited into these extremist organizations. The African Union for Peace and Security Commission have said that well over 6,000 African youth have joined ISIS in Iraq and in Syria a couple of years ago. And in fact, even though ISIS have been defeated, it doesn't mean that all of these people have been killed. Many of them have returned back to their home countries. Okay, we can talk about Shamima Begum, the Bangladeshi British girl who joined ISIS at age 15, and upon her return to Britain, she was prevented from entering the country, and so she's now stateless. And we are talking about a country which has very top-notch security surveillance. Okay, but then what happens in Africa? These people come back and they actually establish sleeper cells right in the noses of the security agencies, and most of the time they are not even seen. We should start asking ourselves, are these people debriefed? I remember some time ago, some Ghanaians got stranded in Libya, and the government had to facilitate their return to Ghana. We need to ask ourselves that, were these people debriefed before they were sent back into their communities? Did we just give them money and told them, oh, go back into your communities? Did we have any plans to reintegrate them back into society? Do we keep an eye on maybe a few of them to establish whether they have plans of being exposed to these extremist organizations, and whether they have plans of attacking life and property in their communities? And I think these are questions we should be asking ourselves, especially as young people. Yes, I'm a lecturer, but I'm a very, very young man, and some of these things are are very, very important to me. So I'll just end here for other speakers to talk, so that at least we'll know that this particular forum is geared towards bringing we young people to knowing that extremist organizations are ripe now, and most of their activities are geared or garnered to bring in we the young people so that they can be alive. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Evans. Okay, so moving on to you, Dr. Sama. So we want to understand the concepts of violence extremism to even begin with. Okay, so can you just give us a short overview of violence extremism on the African continent?
Well, thank you very much for the question. Let me start
Dr.
by.
Okay, thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, please, I can.
Yeah, I was just saying thank you very much for giving me the floor, and but let me start by first thanking the All Africa Students Union for this important event, organizing this important event, and for inviting me. And I also take this opportunity to say how happy I am and honored I am sharing this platform, this panel with such distinguished panelists. As you know, I work for the African Union Mission in Somalia, which is actively involved in countering violent extremism, primarily by Al-Shabaab and ISIS, Somalia, over the past 14 years. And despite the huge success we have made, it has increasingly become clear to us, to partners, to the Somali government, that the military option, in as much as it is important, it cannot do it all. It is time for, I may say, all hands on deck. And that is why the responsibility for countering violent extremist groups in Africa, just a minute. My apologies. The responsibility for countering violent extremist groups in Africa should not be left to the state alone or to government security agencies, civil society organizations. The university, for example, has a key role to play. And you could say majority of the African countries are facing, directly or indirectly, the threat of violent extremist groups. And with the cyberspace, which is unregulated, hundreds of thousands of African youth are being radicalized, and people seem not to pay attention to that. And so that's why I really think this discussion is so important, in as much as it could lead to drafting policy briefs that can help inform decision and policy makers. And whether it's from the north of Africa, the south, now we see what is happening in Mozambique, where you have the coalition of the willing. South Africa and other neighboring countries of the SADC region are trying to support a SADC member state, Mozambique, to overcome the challenges of terrorism. And Boko Haram, that's well known. My country, Cameroon, is affected. It started as a Nigerian problem, and now it's a regional problem. It's an African problem. And one thing we see about radicalization, which leads to violent extremism, is that they know no borders. It should concern everyone. It should concern every country. This is what I may just say as a way of introduction. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. And so still on what you're just talking about. So you highlighted the fact that it's becoming a widespread concern You spoke about how it's becoming widespread in other African countries. For example, Boko Haram started in Nigeria, is currently in Cameroon and other neighboring countries. So what exactly, I mean, bringing it down to universities, what exactly is the main challenge? What are we missing? Okay, like what are we missing as stakeholders in curbing this situation at the university level?
Well, the university has an important role to play across the board, right from prevention to even countering efforts at de-radicalization. The university has an important role to play. And previously, I think the university thought that, well, this is something for the state to handle. But we see increasingly now that the role of the university is even more important because, as I said a while ago, the military option, the military solution to countering radicalization, whether through early warning system, through intelligence, it's not working. It's important, but it has to be complemented by other efforts. So the university can play a very important role. And the campus, as you were saying, is increasingly becoming a hotbed for radicalization. And the campus being like a microcosm of the society, we go there, you meet people from diverse backgrounds, and some people find it difficult to cope in such societies. There's issues about identity, issues about alienation, about exclusion, which makes people often to get to the university hoping to learn, but feeling frustrated and easily with the availability of the cyberspace, many of them, so research is very important, even understanding what drives people to those groups, what drives people to even get to the level of committing, supporting an ideology, facilitating it, and actively involved in committing political violence or religious violence. So university can help to also provide empirical data. And as you know, the government can do much, but the university can support efforts and undertaken by Parliament and by policy makers just by providing the data. Intervention should be evidence or data-based, and I think the university can play a key role. Scholars, especially religious scholars, can help to debunk some of the false narratives which young people are getting, and some of the twisted ideologies that some of the self-appointed prophets or imams, they are propagating either. Generally, social and human sciences can play a key role, and in understanding human behavior, and as I said, really understanding why people can engage in such activities. So this is what makes, and as well, the university just in providing a conducive atmosphere that would promote dialogue and tolerance and reconciliation on the campus can help as a prevention mechanism, such that people can get there and then they feel free to express themselves in a way that contributes to the debate, rather than live in isolation, maybe based on religious or based on ethnicity. That really doesn't help to create a conducive atmosphere for expression of ideologies or expression of views.
Okay, thank you. So Dr. Evans, let me just move to you a bit. Dr. Evans.
Yes,
can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
So so using Ghana as a case study, okay, in 2015, we saw a graduate of KNUST, that's Nazim Note Alema, being recruited into ISIS. I mean, throughout the country, everyone was extremely frightened because this was something that we were not used to hearing before. Yeah. So after this situation, I mean, what would you say is the current state in tertiary institutions? And also, what are we doing to handle these emerging threats and dynamics?
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's unfortunate because Nazir Alema is someone I actually know personally.
Okay.
Yes, his cousin Isaac Alema was a very good friend of mine, and growing up in Tema, he used to visit Alema, and I was in class with Alema, so it's someone I knew. So when I heard that story, I was then doing my PhD in China, I became very worried. And then I realized that when people leave the the senior high school into tertiary institutions, most of them now become free, in quotes. Because I mean, for myself and Lieutenant Colonel Beblulati, we attended a very strict boys' school. So there are certain things that you couldn't have done in that school. But then when we move to the tertiary institutions, we kind of get some form of freedom. And this freedom, especially with the budding social media. For example, ISIS supporters and their fighters have used social media platforms like WhatsApp, Facebook, Twitter to recruit new members. According to Aleme's cousin, he was always online, and some of his roommates did not really know what he was doing online because he was always found online. So they thought that probably he was recruited through the social media platform. Okay. Now, we all know that these extremist organizations use videos and images to tap into the hollow spaces of person psyche. Okay, so when someone or a young man feels marginalized in the university society, or there's some form of exclusion, that young man would feel that if I join forces with these people, then it may be a form of rite of passage for me, or it will be a form of me belonging to them. Now, it's become very serious because universities in Ghana do not actually uh, are not able to monitor the movement of students, or they are not able to monitor the activities of students, and it's very critical. Like I said earlier on, you may never know when these extremist organizations are even using sleeper cells within the university communities. And to be very honest, I wouldn't be surprised if we have that kind of sleeper cells in our university communities. Now, what can be done? I think it is very critical that the state security architecture supports the universities, uh, not just the universities, but pre-tertiary institutions. Currently, I know about 6 people who have been picked up by the security agencies in Ghana. Some of these news don't come up in the media. Some of them were actually in senior high schools, not even in the universities. Okay, and now we're talking about the fact that universities are not even able to monitor or provide guidance and counseling sessions for students. How much more having surveillance on or keeping an eye on student activities and possibility of getting them radicalized. So I think it would be very important if the state security apparatus would help the university communities in monitoring, in trying to keep an eye on some of these activities. Also, I believe that parents have a role in all of this. Many of our university students are not people who are fending for themselves. But then when they are home, it almost seems like their parents do not care what they do when they come back home. When you're, as a parent, I think if my little girl is always on the internet, I should be concerned about what she's doing. So yes, parents also have a role to play in making sure that their kids do not get radicalized, or their wards do not get radicalized. And it's very important that for your kid to always be on the internet, you should check exactly what they are doing. Also, I think that it is time we think about forming clubs in schools that will be aimed at reorienting and re-conscientizing students, and the need for them to be aware of some of these threats and how they can seek help from becoming radicalized. If there are clubs in the universities that would help students to be aware that, look, when someone contacts you about something like this, this and this and this is what you can do. I think it's going to go a long way to help solve some of this problem. Also, I think there should be a national security strategy and form of counter-terrorism document, which I'm not very sure. I'm sure Lieutenant Colonel Belulati would know a lot about this one. I believe that when you want social change, it is about law and education. Some of these documents would also go a long way in trying to curb violent extremism in our universities. Civil society must also do a lot of education. We shouldn't always be talking politics and all, but civil society should take security, especially within our university spaces, very important. And I believe if some of these things are done, we wouldn't have the case of another Nazir Alema joining ISIS. I believe some time ago, few months ago, I also heard about another Ghanaian who did a video from Mali, I believe. But I understand he was killed in the suicide bombing operation. So you see, many of our young people are being radicalized, and many of them are in the university spaces. And I believe that if the universities take up very serious measures to counter some of these things, it's going to go a long way to help. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So at this point, I'd like to move on to efforts at the national level. And I'd like to bring in Lieutenant Colonel Larry Bevlulase, if he's here with us.
Yes, I am.
Colonel.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. Hi. So thank you. Glad to have you. So I'd like to take the discussion to the national. You made mention of the fact that some students were recruited at the senior high school level. And that's actually quite frightening because it shows that very little effort has been done to curb extremism, especially at that level. And so I'd like to ask you that what can be done from the state or national level to help address these emerging threats, also curb violence extremism in universities in Ghana and Africa at large?
First of all, let me thank you for organizing this and for having me. Well, to start with, I would say that history and literature, indicate that each generation faces its own unique threat of violent extremism and terrorism in any selected geographical area. I'm therefore rather excited to be associated with the effort by the All Africa Students Union to take the matter of the prevention of violent extremism up at the level of the university environment. That is a truly all of society approach, I should say, and that helps. It is my hope that the effort will contribute to policy decision-making and implementation, actually, on the prevention of violent extremism across the African continent and actually beyond. Now, the youth and academia in the environment of higher learning, fact-finding, and debate, are indeed worthy stakeholders, I should say, in the effort to find appropriate ways to prevent and counter violent extremism on the continent. We should know that even as of now, we don't have any universally accepted definitions for terrorism or for violent extremism. And therefore, there is quite some flux. What it is important, perhaps, is that it's all about the way of life of a people and efforts at rejection of that way of life of a people. So the contending interest in determining whether a particular way of life is sustained or toppled. Now, if we look at extremism from that point of rejection of the status quo, and therefore the use of violence to obtain an alternative, then we'll begin to see that it's a matter of contending interests So we will need to find out what are the contending interests, what interests are at play, and why would they then want to recruit at whatever level, and what manpower, what capacity of manpower do they require, and why are they therefore recruiting from a particular place? And if you look at terrorism, over the years and across the world, you will see that it is the youth who are the key players. Because, it is the youth who are required to carry out acts of violent extremism and acts of terrorism. Now, what we are talking about and what I'm excited about that you have put up, it's about prevention. How do we prevent violent extremism? Well, there is all this debate about prevention and countering, and therefore we need to be sure whether we are using them interchangeably or that we are using prevention, to connote that we want to address those conditions that will, facilitate violent extremism, or that violent extremism has actually occurred and want to disrupt it or want to counter it. So I'm on the side of prevention. Now, what I would say is that, yes, so far as Ghana is concerned, coming to your question, a lot has been done over the years. And as at now, Ghana has a framework for the prevention and countering of violent extremism and terrorism. And that document is, a document that relies on a whole of government and a whole of society approach to prevention of violent extremism. The first thing is to get the whole society to understand clearly what this document seeks to do. So I think your webinar helps, do that, to conscientize people that there is such a framework, and to find out how they fit into that framework, what roles they have, because there are various roles from various players, because it's a matter of a whole of society approach to the prevention. So each has its role, and the universities will also find their role, in there. I would also say that, yes, answering your question again, Ghana has a national security strategy now. So within the context of that national security strategy, again, there are provisions for the prevention of violent extremism. There are provisions for ensuring that we maintain our way of life, that we ensure national stability. Like I've said, this whole issue of violent extremism is about the rejection of our way of life. It's about the rejection of a particular way of life of a people, and that there are contending interests which want to bring about an alternative. So again, like I'm saying, the national security strategy, gets straight at that and seeks to preserve our way of life, which is one of a secular government, which is one of the rule of law, constitutionality, justice, lack of impunity, cohesion, social cohesion, those are the tenets that determine our way of life. And those are the things that the national security strategy seeks to protect. So I would say, in short, in response to what you are saying, that yes, Ghana has done quite, has made quite some effort to establish the architecture for the prevention of violent extremism. Various sectors of the society have roles to play. And for what I know, the conscientization has already started to get various players to play their roles, for the implementation of the strategy or the framework. I will leave it at that as of now.
Thank you. So not to play the devil's advocate, okay, but then you spoke a lot about the efforts that have been made, example, through the policy, amongst others. But to you, what would you say is the main thing that we need to work on as a nation in ensuring that violent extremism could be kept to a large extent?
Well, the point is straight that extremism is about the rejection of the status quo, the rejection of the way of life. Now, the fact that one is an extremist and rejects the way of life does not mean that one is a violent extremist or one is a terrorist, because you could be extremist and, come out openly to organize rallies, to do advocacy and say that you completely reject, the national policy and propose alternatives. So it is not bad to be an extremist. And it is, so that needs to be encouraged. That is to say, people need to be listened to. Those who have alternate, views about any policy need to be listened to and engaged. So that is where it starts. Now, one would say that it is when extremists are not engaged that they will see the use of violence as a last resort and therefore become violent extremists and therefore use, other resort to other means of, ensuring what they are looking for, which would then amount to terrorism, because terrorism as it is actually just a strategy, whether it is one of attrition, whether it's one of intimidation, it's just a strategy. But it starts with the extremism, that we have extremists who are not listened to and they become violent. And therefore, you will see that, for me, you have asked a personal question, I would say that it is about the society and the fact that people can be listened to. The media in Ghana is such an open place that anybody can say anything. That helps a lot. That helps. It's not so in a number of other countries. Huh? That helps a lot. So it helps. People who think differently should be able to express themselves. And then those things which determine our way of life as a people, that is the rule of law, justice, lack of impunity, should all be at play. And I think once that environment is encouraged, then it completely puts away or it takes away from violent extremists or persons who would want to exploit whatever grievances there would be, because grievances will evolve if we do not stick to the things, the tenets of our society, as we have talked about justice, rule of law, and the rest of them. And then finally, I would also say that in ensuring a cohesive society, there is the need to build trust between the government and the governed. The extent to which on a continuum that trust survives or is broken down determines whether we are moving in the right way, or in the wrong way.
Thank you. But Kennel, you have to forgive me for this, but I realized a little bit too late that I didn't get your opening remarks. And I want to apologize for that. And I know
that is okay. That's okay. At least you made me join.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so right through this conversation has been the issue of social media or the cyber space and then its influence in extremist activities. So I'd like to come to you, Dr. Walters, if you can hear me.
Yes,
Dr. Walters.
I can hear you.
Okay, thank you. So as I said earlier, so given the growing increase in social media activities with young people, what can be done or what can we do to help curb the spread of extremist groups using these social media spaces at the universities?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, when we talk about the cyberspace and the social media platforms, WhatsApp and all the other tools that are being used to radicalize youth, you may see that as one of the pull factors, which are very attractive. And as the speaker was saying a while ago, you first want to focus on the push factors, which I consider the structural and root causes of radicalization. Those things that really trigger people to become radicalized and obviously perhaps end up being violent extremists. What can the university do? What can the government do? First is to regulate the cyberspace. In many African countries, the cyberspace is unregulated, even when there exists a legal framework. People go there and often children living with very responsible parents ended up being radicalized without their parents knowing because they have very little control. the state has very little control, and you can put a security officer behind every student, every youth, in every house. So, as I said, well, everybody has to play a role, and what can the university do? And if there is not enough space for expression on the university campus, the cyberspace becomes an option. And so the university should be adopting a strategy or a policy of perhaps no student left behind, which allows a social cohesion on the campus, knowing that by its nature, there's going to be competition on the university campus. There's going to be clash of culture, clash of civilization, clash of ideas, but that's what the university is all about. It should be able to even adopt a diversity day, which is celebrated by everyone, by every student, where they showcase their culture, they showcase their religion, they express their views. Now, by creating such an accommodative, conducive atmosphere on a campus, that can really help students who might have felt left behind, isolated, to have a platform to express themselves, because it's so important for people who may feel aggrieved to express themselves. By not having that opportunity, extremist groups are adept at, exploiting those grievances and promising everything on earth and even beyond to these young people. And the cyberspace becomes attractive. They spend a lot of time on it. And the very strategic communication strategies of these extremist groups are very effective in radicalizing the youth. So adopting a no student left behind policy on the campus, I think, is important. University campuses or administrations can also establish a kind of early warning systems that helps to identify radicalization on the campus, which can also help other students to report their classmates when they identify, indicators of that a student is being radicalized. Also, they can provide guidance counselors, which can help, because some of the students who end up being radicalized, you could consider them as victims of, some of the social inequalities that we find in our society, including in the university. They are victims, and they end up becoming perpetrators of violence. So a policy of no student left behind brings everybody on board. And I'll just give an example in a situation where, like on the University of Ghana, for example, whether it's in Lagos, where you have a situation where no one student should feel victimized because he's a Muslim, or he's a Fante, he's an Ewe, he's an Ashanti. No person should feel, because oftentimes discrimination or marginalization against a people can trigger just an individual to say, I am the defender of my people. He might become radicalized and engage in violence, not because of something that directly concerns him, but just because he sees himself as a defender of the collective, the community he comes from, he hails from. So it's so important to have an open door policy in the university, which allows for all of these views to be expressed and canalized. Just by doing that helps them to have a feeling of acceptance, a feeling of belonging, a feeling of identity within the same campus. I think this is what I may say for the time being. Thank you. Okay,
thank you. So I want to stress on something you just mentioned. You're talking about how the government has to regulate the social media space. But it looks like most people are always of the opinion that government regulating the social media space is quite an infringement on their human rights. I mean, I'm just speaking on a more broader context. An example, we saw it in Uganda, we saw it in Zambia, we saw it in Eswatini. When the governments of these countries try to regulate the social media space, it led to a widespread cry by the people calling for the government to step down. So, I mean, how can we draw the fine line between government regulation and the social media space?
That is a pertinent question, and one that will continue for a long time. Experience across the continent, whether it's the examples you cited or in Cameroon and so on, governments have instead used those measures to stifle conversation, to stifle freedom of expression. I may say that it's mostly been political motivated. People, you could see during this pandemic, people have been willing to sacrifice their liberties for the collective good. We've seen that. In the West, you see a lot of fighting as people are talking about refusal, rejection of the mask. You don't see that in Africa. So the examples you cited, if you get to look at the political undertones, you understand that governments instrumentalize them for their own ends, not for the common good. And that's why you see people revolting, because people are very much conscious of they're very much conscious of their rights. And it's not like in the 60s or before the 90s where government could say anything and have a free pass. Now people know what is good for them. And it's important for the government, if the government can explain itself very well, I'm sure they will have the buy-in of the population. It's really about participation, involvement, and so on. But clearly, I must say this, because I've been following those developments in the different countries you cited, Uganda and so on, especially in the build up to elections. You see Ethiopia in the build up to elections, you see, the shrinking of the cyberspace, and you could say this is for liberties. No, it's rather to support efforts by the ruling party or the ruling government to prolong its stay in power. This is what I may say for now in this response. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. So, Dr. Evans, moving on to you now. I mean, we are still on the issue of drivers of violence extremism. Dr. Evans, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. I'm here.
Okay. So I'm still on the drivers, still on the push and pull factors of violence extremist recruitment. I want to talk about the youth bulge, the emerging youth bulge in Africa. I mean, we have a lot of graduates who are finishing school now. They come out and they find themselves unemployed. I mean, it's very difficult to talk to someone who is unemployed and tell the person wants to join an extremist group when you cannot give the person an alternative or some form of economic venture. So what can we do about the youth bulge problem to help curb extremist activities?
I think that as part of the national security strategy to curb terrorism, the strategy must first of all be aimed at achieving or identifying the deep-rooted socioeconomic and political factors that cause terrorism, and unemployment is one of them. I believe that by combating poverty, providing the youth with not only the Western style education. Okay, now when they come up, now we are talking about graduates here, but then there are so many of our youth who couldn't go to school. Okay, so we could actually provide them with technical education, like in carpentry, masonry, painting, or whatever field there is, that can guarantee them a means of living comfortably. Okay. So as part of this national security strategy, the government should know that unemployment is actually a national security problem. And solving unemployment is going to solve a lot of these socioeconomic problems. Okay. Secondly, I believe that there must be institutions like that of Lieutenant Colonel Bevelolati that must be funded, okay, and equipped with enough materials for them to do a lot of research within our community. Okay, so if students come out of school and they cannot find jobs, I mean, there is a backlog of over 5 years of students who finish a national service and they cannot find jobs. So I believe that as part of our national security strategy, job creation should be very, very important. Now, when people are given jobs, sometimes they don't even have the time to to be idling around for some of these extremist organizations to be able to recruit them. Okay, so I believe that it should be at the national level. It shouldn't just be at the local level, but it should be a national security strategy to make sure that students who graduate from school. Now, when I was in school in China, months before graduation, you find so many organizations coming into the university spaces trying to recruit students. We don't have that kind of thing here. I don't know when that can start, but then I believe that government should take a step in trying to find jobs for students who graduate from school. If they cannot find jobs, what about entrepreneurship? A few days ago, our Minister of Finance have said that graduating students should rather go into entrepreneurship. Okay, but then government should put in strategies to help these young people right from school to find jobs to do. And if that is not done, we're going to have these problems for a very long time. People come out of school, they cannot find jobs, they become very idle, and then the possibility of them being radicalized become very, very high. So I believe it should be something that should be discussed at the national security level, that unemployment of the youth should be very, very important for not just the local government, but the government at the national level. I live in a very new community, and we have this problem of land guards and all of that. So there was this guy, one of these land guards I had an encounter with, but I realized the guy could speak very good English. So I asked him, did you go to school? So I started interacting with him. And from my interaction with him, I realized that he was actually a university graduate. And this is someone who couldn't find a job. So he's actually found himself doing something he wouldn't want to do. So I believe that job creation should be a very, very important strategy for government if we really want to prevent or curb terrorism in Ghana. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So, Kennel, please, moving on to you. I would like to talk about the porous nature of our borders. Okay, and given the fact that universities all over Africa these days are made up of people from different African countries. I mean, you can go to a school like Legon, University of Ghana, Legon, and find students from Nigeria, Cameroon, Burkina Faso. So it gives it a more multinational or multicultural background to it. But I'd like to know, given the porosity of the borders, how can we actually control that situation on the African continent? Kennel, please, can you hear me?
Yeah, okay. Now, first of all, yes, we are encouraging a free trade area for Africa. So when we are talking about, I hope you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you.
Good. So when we are talking about controlling the borders, we should be very clear what exactly we want, to do, because we want to encourage people to cross the borders and trade so they can make some money, so they don't become frustrated. So the youth can move around the region and make some money, get employment wherever there is employment, bring their skills to bear. So when we're talking about, the borders, then we have to be very specific on what we are looking for. And that should be intelligence-led, which means that we should know exactly what we want border security to serve and pursue it along those lines, and not just, consider the issue of, closing the borders. That is the first thing. I think that the Ghana Border Commission, for instance, has been doing quite some, good work, liaising with all the other countries that border Ghana, and they have quite some arrangements as to how to make life easy for the people. How can border residents, for instance, be able to cross the border and, live their lives? Because that is a source of frustration, which could rather lead to extremism. You spoke about the university campus and persons from various countries coming in. Yes, like I said from the beginning, each generation in the geographical area has its specific circumstances that leads to violent extremism and terrorism. The situation in Mali is not the same as the situation in Ghana. So you cannot say, for instance, that because this happened in Mali, it's going to happen in Ghana, or because it happened in Burkina Faso, it's going to happen. We have different circumstances. We have a certain way of life, and we have certain things that inform violent extremism in each of these areas. And we need to be very specific on what exactly the vulnerabilities here in Ghana are. What grievances are there that can be exploited by who is important? What environment do we have that even if people who would want to recruit people for violent extremist activity come into our environment, they are debarred or they are inhibited from actually, going ahead. If you look at Mali, 3 clerics in Mali determine a lot of what people do in Mali so far as violent extremism is concerned. Or 4 if I should add Amadou Kufa to Haidara, the sheriff, and Diko. You see that is different in Ghana here. We don't have that, and that would be different in other countries. So if we are talking about people coming into our university and the multicultural thing, yes, what I think the universities want to do is to promote tolerance. Is to, for instance, even have studies in terrorism. In fact, these are the things that we need to study now. So the university should offer courses in terrorism. It should offer courses in violent extremism. Young men should be writing, the youth should be writing on these things and giving their perspectives and offering what they think needs to be done. Because actually, you see, this idea of 60 and 70-year-olds sitting at the African Union and writing Agenda 2063 for the youth should not be the case. The youth are the leaders of today, not tomorrow. So they should be seriously involved in determining what policy is. And I think that is, what needs to be done. And then the issue of tolerance. The issue of tolerance is key to all that we are doing. We have said, or like I have said from the beginning, that this whole thing about violent extremism, it's about contending interests, where one way of life wants to topple another way of life and think that, this is wrong and this is right. But what is right and what is wrong is normative, actually. So if a contending interest is able to mobilize such force as to topple a certain way of life, then you begin to have a problem, because then there is a rejection of a certain way of life. And that is what extremism and violent extremism is about, because once you use force to do that, and if we look at it critically, let's be very frank and plain. Let's look at the West Africa situation. There is a certain worldview that has sought to change the ways of lives of people. And, there is a certain understanding that this is right and this is wrong. Yes, true, depending on which group of people we are talking about. I'm Catholic. You see, Catholics, we fast. But you see, the point is that if it's time to fast and I don't fast, my dad would not, normally come at me. The whole society would not condemn me. But you can see that, for instance, for a Muslim, there is such discipline. So there is such strictness that if it's time to fast, he should fast. And his other colleagues are going to, condemn him if he does not fast. Now, what I'm trying to bring out here is that we must have due respect and tolerate other people's beliefs. When we don't do that, and one belief, people in a certain environment try to, look down upon the beliefs of others, it creates difficulties. And that is what, again, radicalization is about, because then people begin to get people to follow them and, understand what they are saying and use them for certain purposes by way of the contending worldviews and the contending ways of life. So I would say that it's a matter of tolerance. And in the universities, they should begin to look critically at offering courses in, extremism and, discuss the matters. Debate the issues at the level of the university and find out what exactly, the issues are that are, that are undermining tolerance and peaceful coexistence, because that is the issue, tolerance and peaceful coexistence. I'm done. Hello? 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 It looks like I've been off, eh? Hello? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I don't think you are off.
Yes, yes, sir. We can hear you.
We heard everything that you said.
We heard
Yeah, okay,
everything.
okay.
It was a superb discussion. I would want to remind everybody that the chat session is
I'd like to stress. Okay, so using Ghana. Sorry, Edmond, I didn't hear you. Edmond.
Yeah, I was taking the opportunity to remind everybody that we'll be having a Q&A session, so they can go ahead and use the raise hand button, and then they can also use the chat session to also ask their questions. There's also the Q&A that they can use. People have already started submitting their questions. Please keep them coming. Adelaide is eager to read your questions and pose them to our panelists. So Adelaide, over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Edmond. Okay, so please, still on the issue you were just discussing about religious tolerance. Okay, I'd like to use Ghana as a case study. I mean, in recent times, we've seen a lot of tension, or a little bit of tension between the Christians and the Muslims. I mean, quite recently, we saw what happened in Westby Senior High School when the Muslim girl was not allowed to fast. We saw in 2019 demonstrations by the Muslim community because they were not allowed to wear their hijab. And I mean, we've seen several incidences in relation to religious issues. I'd like us to establish the link between between religion and violence extremism, or between religion and countering violence extremism. If you can hear me.
I can hear you clearly.
You want me to repeat it?
No, I can hear you. I've heard you.
Okay.
Okay. So you would want me to comment on what you said. You see, Islam, it's a very disciplined way of life. And I would submit that its requirements for discipline are much more strict than those of Christianity. So, and then another point is that Islam has so many scholars. If you take your time to look at the number of scholars that there are in Islam, you will be amazed. And these scholars have written a great deal on the Quran itself and its interpretation and what it requires of, the Ummah or the followers, and then also the tradition, the hadith, and what is the Sunnah, what is required of, the followers. So you can see that being a Muslim places a lot on you by way of discipline. That this is not right. The Quran does not authorize this. You see, there is a little bit more flexibility when it comes to Christianity. So we have to, have a clear understanding about that. Now, and also that we are in secular situations now where you have secular governments and whatnot. You will see that with Islam, they are looking at what the ulama is saying about the societal behavior. Does he approve of this societal behavior? Does the ulama say that this is what the Quran approves of or the Sunnah approve of? Then there is the Qadi, who is the judge, actually. So they are looking at Sharia law and saying that, no, this is what the Quran asks us to do. We have to live by the tenets of Sharia law. And the Qadi is the judge. He actually even, sits over both civil and criminal cases, so far as the Sharia, so far as Sharia is concerned. So we have to know that there is that background. If you have Muslims in the society and they are not living by Sharia law, then you can say that already to some extent they are doing that because of tolerance, because under the strict rendition of the religion, they should have been living by Sharia law. So you can see that already you are beginning to have certain difficulties. And that is where the engagement is required. That is where the tolerance is required. That we must live, we must have mutual, respect for each other and find the compromises that we require to be able to live. I didn't see the need to talk about the young lady wearing a hijab. That is her belief. She wants to wear a hijab. Now, I don't also see any problem with somebody wearing a rasta. There are several areas in which we require, mutual, peaceful coexistence. And like I'm saying, like I have said before, there are contending interests, each one trying to topple the other. So we have to find compromise, situations. We have to find a compromise for mutual coexistence and respect for the beliefs, of others. Now, if, I want to drink a beer, I don't see why the Muslim community should come and close down the bar. But you see that in a typically Muslim community, they would not want a bar to operate. So these are areas of compromise. So we have a lot of work to do, you see, and you should know that there are hotheads each way. So hotheads might come and say, no, we don't agree. We cannot compromise on this. And like I said, particularly in Islam, there are so many scholars, even in Egypt today, they have banned the Muslim Brotherhood and declared it a terrorist group. And that, for instance, is creating some difficulty between Egypt, United Arab Emirates, and Saudi on the one hand, and Turkey and Qatar on the other. Now, there is a certain, and if you look at West Africa, don't let us run away from it. The issue we have today about violent extremism and terrorism is a jihadi, Salafi jihadi movement that is seeking to say that no, the way of life here should be by Sharia law. And there is also the Islamization and Arabization that comes with it. So we have a problem on our hands, and we need to we need to engage, so that we can live, in peace. And I think that at the university level, you cannot have a better environment to engage in this, where young men or young ladies, really engage in this by way of thinking and debate and say that, no, we all have to live here in peace. How do we do it? That is the issue. And those kind of discussions should then feed into government policy making, because we have a constitution. In Ghana, for instance, we have a constitution. It's not like, in the north of Nigeria, Zamfara and other states just declare Sharia law. Now, if we had that today, where let's say that Greater Accra declares Sharia law, or, Eastern region declares Sharia law, they're going to have quite some difficulty. So the engagement is important, that we see what limits we can tolerate each other on. We need to go straight to the matter and realize that, the issue we have today is the terrorism that we are faced with, whether in Mali, Niger, northern Nigeria, Burkina Faso. It's about the group for support of Islam and Muslims. It's about Islamic State in the Greater Sahara. It's about the Messina brigade. It's about Boko Haram. And if you look at all these, you will see that principally, in the main, our violent extremism problem is coming from that angle. And we don't have to hide. We have to address it, frontally, so that we can find, solutions to that. And I think that the universities can play a big role, harnessing the youth and getting them to lead. Because, like I said, they are the leaders. Perhaps our generations have failed to address this, but the youth must take this up seriously at the university level and debate these things and see how they are going to coexist, in the future. Otherwise, then it could be quite difficult.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Dr. Evans, let me just come to you a bit before we wrap up this session. Dr. Evans.
Yes, I'm here. I can hear you.
Okay, so Kenan was just talking about the whole idea of religious tolerance, okay? But would you say in universities, like this is something that is existing now? I mean, from your line of work, would you say we have a culture of religious tolerance in Ghana?
Thank you very much. For me, not teaching in a typical Ghanaian university, but I teach in a university which comprises students from all over Africa. Yeah, I mean, in my class, I have students from South Africa, Liberia, and you realize that many people come with different idiosyncrasies. Some are Muslims, some are Buddhists, some are Christians. I believe that generally in Ghana, there is some form of religious tolerance. For example, in my university, Christians are allowed to worship, Muslims are allowed to worship. You wouldn't find anyone trying to bring a blockade on the part of anyone who is trying to worship or to do whatever belief they practice. And I'm very happy when Kendall talked about the fact that there could be days of diversity and all of that. It's very, very important that we tolerate religion of other people. Okay, I am a traditionalist, and if I am a traditionalist and I'm in the class with someone who is a Christian, we should know that even in our pre-tertiary institutions, that is our secondary institutions in Ghana. For example, in my secondary school in Bishop Herman College, there is a mosque, even though it's a typical Roman Catholic school. So the Muslims are allowed to pray when they are doing their fasting. We keep food for them in the dining hall at the pantry, so that after their fast they can come and eat. I believe not just in my secondary school or my university, but there are so many schools that practice such things, that you find a very typical Christian school, but then Muslims are allowed to worship. Religious tolerance in Ghana is quite a good thing. I don't think that we are being very intolerant religiously. So I think it's something we should continue. We should continue being tolerant to other people's beliefs, and it's going to go a very long way to bring down violent extremism.
Okay, thank you very much. So just before we move on to the final set of questions, that's the final round, and we've been speaking for a while now, and I want to know if you, the listeners, are still with us. So if you're still with us, just raise your hand up, and then let us know that you've been following us this entire time. So you can either raise your hand up or just send in a comment to make us know that you are still with us. Okay, so then moving to the final round. So this is the way forward. What can we do? We've identified the problem. We've seen the emerging threats. What can we do? So I'd like to start with Dr. Walter Summer. Doc, please, can you hear me?
Very well.
Okay, so we want to discuss what can universities do moving forward to help curb this phenomenon of violent extremism.
Yeah, I think as we've been saying throughout this this conversation, the university has an important role to complement the important efforts that the government and its security forces are undertaking, which we say it's not enough. And like my colleague was saying, a fellow panelist was saying, you need a whole of society approach. And in that whole of society approach, the university has a key role to play. While the state is doing, important things like community policing and addressing the root causes of radicalization, which are all found within, governance challenges, whether it's lack of education, illiteracy, unemployment, you put that under challenges. There's no government that will be able to overcome all those challenges. So we expect that the university will keep on having young people coming. And so what can the university do to prevent them from being radicalized? And if they are already radicalized, how can the university help in de-radicalizing them by the work that it does? Or perhaps stop them from transitioning from radicalization to become violent extremists. I think part of it is just, strategic communication. The school, the university can help to communicate the national strategy in fighting radicalization. Of course, every country, a while ago, I got to know Ghana has a CVE program and strategy. The university can mainstream that on the campus in its messaging. The university, as I think Dr. Tete was saying a while ago, in this thing about religious dialogue, religious tolerance, and I think we should go beyond just tolerating another religion. I think it should even more of, interreligious exchanges, interreligious dialogue, getting to know about other religions, getting to share, whether it's time, the period of Ramadan, how do you allow Christians to also celebrate Ramadan on the campus? How can Muslims also join their Christian brothers and sisters? So you really need to go beyond just tolerating them, but really coming to understand them through this interreligious exchange programs. And I think when it comes to on the issue about the cyberspace and how it is contributing in radicalizing young people, the university can do sensitization, whether it's through billboard, through flyers, introduce it in the induction program. When students are enlisted or they enroll in a university, they usually have this induction, you call it orientation. How do you mainstream this in the package that is given to newcomers, first time, first year students? How do you do that so that you monitor them? And most importantly, I was talking about setting up a monitoring, an early warning and monitoring system in the university, well equipped, that can easily identify and assist and help those who are left behind, who may tend to radical groups. So there's a lot that the university can do beyond just doing research in terms of supporting efforts, government efforts to prevent radicalization, to help in the de-radicalization campaign as well. This is my contribution. I hope others would definitely be adding more substance to what I've said. Thank you.
Sure, thank you very much. Keno, please can we get your final thoughts on the way forward, on what we can do moving forward to help curb the rising incidences of violence extremism in universities in Africa?
Okay, thank you very much. First of all, like I've said, we all have to realize that we have a responsibility in preventing violent extremism. And it is good that the African Union and the member states of the African Union have clearly understood that there is the need for an all-of-society approach to preventing violent extremism. In the specific case of Ghana, I'm very happy with the framework that they have for preventing and countering violent extremism and terrorism. And you can see that that document really looks at, the whole of society approach. What I would say is that the universities need to take the matter up. The universities are a very fertile base for recruitment. And the universities have to come to terms with that. We need to also understand that all that is happening now, it's about influence operations in the human domain, influencing people to take certain decisions, and do certain things. And like I've said, the contending interests are seeking to do that. And we will have to be very clear what the contending interests are so that we could address them. Like I've said, I think that the universities have to take up the matter. They have to realize that they have a big role to play. And now, I would say that they would need to liaise with the authorities. The universities would need to liaise with national authorities to crystallize the role that the universities, need to play, so that both state security authorities and the universities will be in tandem as to what exactly the universities need to do, need to contribute to assist in the efforts to prevent violent extremism. The other thing I would say is that, yes, the universities also need to do a little bit more research and advocacy on governance, the issues of building trust between government and the governed, the issue of, decentralization, for instance, the issue of which one could say is power to the people, because then if there is decentralization and there is power to the local communities, you can see that they feel part of governance. And then the issue of exclusivity and all that will be minimized. Now, the African Union, our heads of states met in 2014, I think at Malabo. And then they came up with the African Charter on the values and principles of decentralization, local government, and local development. That was in 2014. Now, out of 55 member states of the African Union, it's just about 9 which have actually ratified, this charter. Ghana, for instance, has not yet ratified this charter. And I think that the universities should hold governments responsible to ratify this charter, in which case they would be implementing this charter, and the issue of exclusion when it comes to the local level would have been eliminated. And that alone, takes us, a little bit, up the line of prevention of violent extremism. I would want to talk about the youth finally, and to say that, you see, the youth are the leaders of today. You can see you are chairing this program, and you have called me and you're asking me questions. You're in charge. See, the issue is that the youth of today, are saying that, nothing, about them without them is for them. They're making that message very clear, that they want to be part of any decision that affects them. And therefore, I think that the universities have to create the environment, and also state authorities have to create the environment for the youth to discuss this issue of violent extremism and come up with what they think needs to be done. It is not for people my age to sit down and be coming up with what needs to be done. I think that the youth have to, really get involved and discuss this thing and discuss this whole issue very clearly across lines of belief, and we should be able to make some progress. Finally, let me talk about the cyberspace. I would want to say that, well, cyberspace is here, and I don't think that it is the business of any government to break the law in its interest by preventing people from going on cyberspace. If a problem, if a difficulty is identified, then that specific difficulty, should be addressed under the auspices of the law. But to claim that cyberspace is being used for very many good things. And therefore, we cannot say that because cyberspace is being used for radicalization by some people, would want to clamp down on cyberspace. I think that it is the responsibility of the intelligence agencies to be able to, identify who are using cyberspace for what. What websites do they not want people to go to, and they are going there? That is for them technically to find out. So if people are going to certain websites that they think they should not go to, then they can work on that. And I think that is a technical issue, and it should not become a legal issue that would just, be taken up by way of saying that there should be a clampdown on cyber. We have seen that in quite a number of African countries, and that's marks of impunity. And I don't think that it is something we should encourage in Ghana. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Keno. Finally, Dr. Evans. Okay, so I want to move to you to find out how well we can balance efforts in countering violence extremism whilst upholding academic freedom. Dr. Evans, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear. I believe the
Okay,
university community is a space where people go to learn. And so we can say that because we are trying to counter violent extremism, we are going to infringe on their basic freedom of right to study. I think that, first of all, there must be a centralized database of students in our universities. Why am I saying that? because effective intelligence gathering helps to prevent terrorism, because it prevents the state security institutions an opportunity to go a step further ahead of the terrorists. So if the state has a database of students in our universities, it will help intelligence institutions to know exactly what students we have and how they'll be able to counter violent terrorism or violent extremism without necessarily infringing on the rights of students. Secondly, I think that like I've said already, the country or the government should be able to develop a curriculum that is aimed at preserving the integrity of the state. Okay, not just in the university level. It could start from even the primary level. We should know about terrorism. We should know about violent extremism, even as very young people. Okay, and I believe that when this kind of curriculum is integrated within the school system, before students or young people get to the university level, they'll be able to know exactly how to handle some of these things. Also, government should play a more role in the teaching and learning in our schools. For example, the introduction of the Arabic instructor scheme in Ghana now, where government has recruited about 3,000 Arabic teachers. I think that these teachers are just not going to teach the Arabic language. They are going to inculcate the very fiber that these kids need to know, okay, so that even when they get to the university, they know some of these things already, so that their freedom wouldn't be infringed upon. I've already talked about the formation of anti-extremism school clubs, which is very important, so that students can know exactly what to do when people come to them. They'll be able to know exactly who to speak with and exactly what to do in order not to be recruited into this violent extremist organization. Also, I think that it will be very important if the state will be able to separate religion from the state. Government should be able to separate religion from the state apparatus itself. We always say Ghana is a secular country. Okay, so government should take steps in making sure that people know the difference between religion, and they being Ghanaians, or they being South Africans, or they being Ugandans. Okay, when this is done, people would know that religion is just a belief. Religion is what you believe in. It is not something you must do to keep the right of other people. And I believe when all of this is done, the freedom of students in the universities will be kept, so that violent extremism can also be prevented by our security agencies. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Doc. So a big thank you to everyone on my panel today, and we are most grateful for joining us for this program. So at this point, I'd like to move on to hear a few questions from our listeners, just a few questions, because we have really limited time to end this program. So to you, the listeners, if you have any question or contribution, just put up your hand, or you can send it via the chat box and we'll read it out to our panel. Okay. So far, I'm guessing comments coming in from Abdul Manaf Yunus. He's saying Dr. Walter Summer has just made a solid point on integrating mainstream CVE policies to educational policies in preventing radicalization. I however think the best approach should be PVE instead. Okay, so that's coming in from Abdul Manaf Yunus. Okay, and John Linus is asking that we share the presentations with him. Okay, so that'll be done after the program. Okay, Echo, I'm seeing a comment from you asking to contribute orally. If you're still with us, you can unmute your mic and speak. Echo Otu.
Yes, hello.
Hi,
Can
we can hear you.
Right. Colonel Sir, Evans and the other gentleman from I send my regards. This subject it's very interesting to me because I had the privilege of going to school in a black university under apartheid in the 90s, in the early days of apartheid in the 90s. And recruitment by various political organizations and religious organizations took place. So I've had experience. Now, I think that extremism it's part of a continuum of discourse in society. So in my university, for example, there was anti-apartheid society, and then as we go to university, those noises got louder. So people were attracted to be part of those kind of societies. Now, I'm giving that just as an example, and I'm just going to be very brief. If there's a discussion of maybe oppression or toppling one group by another, it starts from home at a very small level, but at university, because there's a huge volume of information, that discourse becomes higher. Now, my view from the experience, and I can't say everything here, my experience is that that chain must be broken. And at university level, people are very ready to absorb all manner of information. So given that, we can use that as a platform to break the thinking. Now, for example, when a person comes to first year, for example, if we had a course, I mean, in Ghana, for example, we have Colonel, who is well-versed in conflict management and all that. If I was curriculum, a curriculum, leadership curriculum, human security curriculum, that everybody who enters the first year university must take and pass before they move to the next level. You see, that in itself gives people the opportunity to think differently. If you wait for them to be second year, third year, by that time they found their feet. It becomes very difficult to influence. The other gentleman talked about sleeper cells. Sleeper cells, when I was in South Africa, we had sleeper cells for all kinds of things. It depended, whatever the issue was, there was and some of us knew who to contact to activate what. Now, sleeper cells are very difficult to detect. Colonel will tell you that. And so, monitoring sleeper cells is to have, in the universities, we have cadets who are mimicking what is stopping us from having an intelligence just like we do cadets. Because universities, as we agree, cadets and all that, why can't we have an intelligence gathering student organization? You see, because there are some of these things, it doesn't matter how the university authorities say, and I have some experiences which for security reasons I can't share here. They will never find out. They will never, it doesn't matter how much you try, you won't find out. To give you an example, the university I went to was called University of the North. Mandela at some point was chancellor of that university. That university was an ANC. In fact, one of our names was Bastion of the anti-apartheid struggle. The kind of support that we got from outside, even the apartheid government could not infiltrate. And so replace apartheid government with a jihadist or Islamist organization supporting students in a university. The only way I think, from my experience, that can be broken because it's by giving them, right as they enter, giving them political education, this human security, leadership, conflict management courses, which 1 year course, which they must pass to get to the next level. Because when we got to university, the first thing the liberation movements did was to expose us to the problems that apartheid was causing Black people. And so we just fell in. We fell in. I mean, we didn't even ask questions. So if you want to go the converse way, let's do the other way and teach people so that they can also fall on the other side, which we desire for society. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Echo. So we are open to take one more comment or one more contribution. Okay, so I'm seeing a question from Abdul Manav Yunus. He's asking, my question goes to Colonel Bevlu Lassie. What do you think about licensing of religious speakers? as it pertains in the legal profession? Should imams and pastors be authorized by the state before they speak? Kenel, please, this question goes out to you. Our final question.
Well, that's something that needs to be discussed, with the religious authorities. But what I would say is about education. The issue of religious education. I've always spoken against the idea of somebody opening, a school and teaching young people about religion. I think that the state must have a syllabus for teaching religion. And, whoever is going to teach religion to the youth must have a certain certification to be able to teach. So you don't just create a madrasa in the corner somewhere in the village, and then you are linking up with somebody in Pakistan who tells you what you want to teach. And then, before we realize we have 20, 50, 100, 1,000 such different schools, and everybody is coming up with a different orientation so far as it is concerned. I would subscribe to the Algerian way of it. In Algeria, the teaching of Islam is as per the curriculum that has been approved by parliament and all. And those who teach it are people who have passed certain exams, and so that it can be taught in school, in the school system. So it should be part of the Ministry of Education arrangement. What Islam is taught and what people, are made to understand are their obligations. I think that is where we could look at it. As for preaching, well, the freedom that go with it, might pose some problems, considering also that the contending worldviews are such that there are a lot of scholarships that are flowing into our system. The Saudis are sending scholarships to train people to preach in the Saudi orientation. The Turkish are doing that. The Sudanese are doing that. The Egyptians are doing that. All sorts of people are leaving these shores, going to train, in some religious, like Ahmadu Kufa trained in Saudi. So you can see he is now in Mali, and he has quite a clout. So like Eko said, the contending interests have to be looked at very carefully, because if we run away from them and think that we don't want to talk about them, that is what is going to hurt us. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Kenel. So also soon, we've come to the end of today's program. And on behalf of the All African Students Union, the West Africa Center for Counter Extremism, and the Center for Security Policy and Research, I would like to say a big thank you to you all, to our panel, and to you, our listeners, for staying with us from the beginning of this program to the end of it. Every single discussion we've had here has been extremely insightful, and then I do hope that it goes a long way to helping all of us. But then just to mention some key points that were spoken about. So we identified the drivers of violence extremism in universities. That's the push and pull factors, as the youth bulge, the existing socioeconomic conditions, marginalization, amongst others. Kenel spoke extensively on religious tolerance and then the need for us to integrate it into our society as well. And we also had other recommendations coming in from Dr. Evans, as he spoke about the need to have peace clubs in our various universities, senior high schools, and other levels of education, as well as factoring in issues of violence extremism into the curricula moving forward, amongst others. So these are just key items that were discussed, as well as creating an early warning stressed on by Dr. Walter Summer on the need to create an early warning system to help detect emerging threats and mitigate them before it's off. So on behalf of all the partners, we'd like to say a big thank you that you join us for subsequent programs that we have. Thank you very much. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.